Do you want to share your gifts with the world, but do you struggle with guilt? Do you know there's something in you that is just bursting to come out, but for so many different reasons, you feel like maybe that flame needs to be stifled? This is what we are going to tackle today in the Possibility Mom Live with my very special guest, Leah Jacobson from the Guiding Star Project. I want to start with a personal update. I continue to be grateful. My podcast last Friday touched a lot of hearts, it seems, because the feedback that you are giving me on the vulnerability, as well as some of the practical things that I shared in there, seems to really have helped a lot of you. So, if you want to listen to that podcast, I unpacked my daughter's recent hospital stay and the fact that we needed to move rather quickly. And it has been really a season of healing for all of us. And so I am very, very grateful to be on the other side I'm still healing, but I'm grateful to be on the other side of a little bit of that chaos, we're going to call it. But to just keep things real interesting over here, just to keep things real interesting, I want to share with you some more personal news. We are expecting baby number 11. For those of you who have been following along for a while, this will be a rainbow baby. This is a rainbow baby after um, our little one, who we named Jude, went to heaven before we got to meet her. We discovered it's still so tender for me, you guys. Oh my gosh. For those of you who have miscarried before, like, does it ever not get tender? You know what I mean? I can't talk about her without tearing up. I don't know what it is. It's so tender still. We discovered later that she was a girl. So we kind of affectionately sometimes call her Judy. But she was miscarried on the day I had my procedure on the day that was St. Jude's feast day. So we went with the name Jude, and affectionately I call her Judy because we found out she was a girl. So this is a rainbow baby for us, baby number 11. And I will probably have some more thoughts later, not right now, but I'll probably have some more thoughts later on the timing of this pregnancy. Now, for the record, my husband and I are very like I don't know what a chart is. For those of you who are familiar with natural family planning and all the things, we do not I do not I learned how to chart. I learned how to follow. So for those of you who might not be familiar, we do not use artificial forms of birth control. It is woven into the dignity of the Catholic Church teaching on women, the dignity of women. So it's woven into the Catholic Church teaching of the dignity of women. What one of the fruits of marriage is, uh, and so stopping via artificial means um, uh, the creation of a new life is just simply something we do not subscribe to. This actually, it's interesting. There's a whole other story, but it's something that I've had to, like when we first got married, I could not conceive of that concept, like open to babies anytime. The controlling part of me was a little bit more inclined to be like, no, I want to plan when I have my babies. There's an ideal space and an ideal time to have a baby. And the Lord just really softened my heart. There's no other real way to explain it. I didn't have some big, like, oh my gosh, like, aha. Like, I didn't have a big sort of come to Jesus moment, so to speak, on that topic, I would just say that it really, like, he softened my heart on this topic. And so we just simply then were very happy to be open to life. And we've had a lot of babies in a short amount of time. And so I'm never surprised about getting pregnant because we know exactly how they got there. Um, but sometimes I will say that I do scratch my head at the timing. I do scratch my head, Lord, and I say, is this really the best time to have a baby? Like, I'm kind of homeless. Like, is this really the best time to have a baby? For accuracy, I am not homeless. We just have very quickly had to move into a new space. So, I am well homed. I'm very grateful for the home that I'm in. We have relocated to a really, really beautiful spot that is very sentimental and meaningful to me and my husband. Okay. So that is the fun personal news. We are expecting baby number 11. It has certainly put another dynamic on my level of emotions this time. Going through all the things that we've gone through in the last couple of weeks. But we are very excited and very grateful. A baby in our family, like a baby in the Canning family, is the kids are just at the point now where this is just exciting. Like, this is just kind of like, when's the next baby coming? Like, after we miscarried our 10th baby, the like they just kept asking, well, when's the next one coming? So I don't know if they're ever going to stop asking. They basically just always ask, is there a baby in your belly? So yes, it'll be it's an exciting this is an exciting time. All right. The other exciting announcement, that if you follow me on Instagram at Lisa Canning, I have made another exciting announcement. There is another thing that I am giving birth to that I am so excited to share with you. And that is the new iteration of the Wealth Without Guilt mastermind experience. And I am just wrapping up 5 days, 5 live days of teaching how to build a six-figure blueprint. I I could go on and on about this experience, this six-figure blueprint, hosting this with Stephanie. It is so much fun to do things together. Entrepreneurship can be so lonely. It can be such a lonely space to be. And I have just found so much solace in doing entrepreneurship in community. When you are at your lowest low, you know that there are people to lift you up. When you are experiencing the frustrations, the losses, the disappointments, the rejection, the fear of failure, all the things, it is so powerful to have people to lift you up. And of course, when you've got somebody who's a little bit further ahead on the journey who can help to guide you strategically, that's going to help you in your business immensely. So, the Wealth Without Guilt Mastermind is going to be a little bit different. It's going to involve my beautiful friend, Stephanie Donahue, who I interviewed just a few weeks ago on the podcast. And this is a beautiful, unique combination of Catholic mindset coaching with strategic, data driven marketing and business planning to help you earn significant income to support your family and build the Catholic economy, all informed by your unique call to sanctity. This week on my live event, we've talked so much about your unique call to sanctity and having everything be informed by said unique call. And so I'm just so excited that we are putting this group together. It's a 6-month experience where you will get to journey with Stephanie and I. And I want to invite you to take a look at the sales page that you can see in the show notes below, wherever you are watching or listening to this. The thing I really want to highlight, and I'm going to just scroll down right here to show you what you get. You get 6 months of group coaching. It's your home for 6 months. We are going to work with you in your business to help you make money, but do so in a way that really honors your unique call to sanctity. But we're doing it in a way. Are you ready? Are you ready? Listen really carefully. We're doing this in a way that you don't need to be on Zoom calls. I think this is a really important change we're making. We are coaching in a way that is called asynchronous. Asynchronous, which means, I hope I'm pronouncing that properly, meaning you get on demand access. We will reply sometimes in exact real time, other times within 24 to 48 hours. You will get a reply from myself or Stephanie or both of us to guide you in your mindset, to guide you in your stress in the moment, and to help you make those strategic decisions all via Slack. This is the kind of thing that I believe even the busiest of Catholic moms can do. This is something that I think even the busiest of Catholic moms who are nursing babies, who can only take 15 minutes at a time truly to work on their business because that's all they got. The way that we structured this mastermind, I believe the busiest of Catholic moms can participate and make money, live out their unique call, and build the Catholic economy all at the same time. So, spots are open. We start May 8th and we are saving you a spot. So, if you are interested, if this is the time for you to make a significant step in your business, lay the foundation for you to make six figures and beyond, I want to encourage you to go to the link in the show notes to grab a spot in our mastermind. Living out your unique call, being the woman you are meant to be, and doing this, following your personal goals and dreams, being the flame that you feel that the Lord has given you, the light that He has lit within you, and doing it without judgment is what we're going to unpack today with my very special guest. I met Leah Jacobson because she participated in an event that I was hosting, a mastermind that I was hosting, and she was seeking coaching. And I'm not going to lie, when she was on the calls with me, I would be like she should be leading this event. Like she should be leading this mastermind experience. Like she is so knowledgeable. She is I could go on and on about how intelligent and articulate, remarkable. She's the kind of woman who, she coaches track and then she's on EWTN and then Fox News calls her and then NPR, like everybody calls her because she has so many things to say about women's health and how we need to change things. Now, you just watched me announce my 11th pregnancy online and here on the podcast, and you watched me talk about, and I'm not going to lie, it was kind of fumbling through it a little bit, why I do not use artificial birth control. And I just have to be kind of honest about this. It is something that I struggle explaining, not because I'm embarrassed or anything like that, but because it's very much informed by my Catholic worldview. And so I'm kind of just like, okay, well, no, duh. I'm just going to follow it because I believe that this is true and that it's good for me. But after getting to know Leah and getting to know her work, getting to know the nonprofit that she has founded that supports women's health, seeing her run these, she's the head of an organization with multiple physical centers across the United States. She's a lactation consultant. She has a wealth of experience and training challenging how we see women's health today. A key component of Leah's overall mission and her book, Holistic Feminism: Healing the Identity Crisis Caused by the Women's Movement, a key component of her work and her mission is to help women realize there's nothing wrong with their bodies, that their bodies don't need to be altered, changed, suppressed, denied, especially in the way that artificial birth control does. Now, like I said, I sometimes struggle talking about this topic because, just if I'm being really honest, I'm like, I don't know how to explain this to people who might not have the same worldview as me. Or even people who do have the same worldview as me. It's such a personal topic. And let me know if any of these things resonate with you. It's going to be uncomfortable to talk about. People don't always open up about their sex lives. People sometimes don't even know like what a cycle is. And so how on earth am I going to talk about natural ways to navigate a cycle when they don't even understand that there are parts of the month where they are very fertile and the parts of the month where they are not. How can I even talk about this without having an MD behind me or any kind of medical training? How can I speak about women's health without having any kind of authority? Or my favorite one is, if I talk about natural forms of birth control, everyone's going to think that I'm just trying to convince them to have 12 kids because I have 11. These are all thoughts that I've had. And maybe you've had them too. Let me know in the comments. But after reading Leah's book and really getting to know her and her mission and her work, she has really created in me a new conviction that avoiding hormonal birth control is not just a Catholic thing, but it's something that we all need to care about if we really care about women's rights. And all of this is so deeply connected with a woman pursuing her personal goals and dreams without judgment, which is so important to me if you've been following me for like half a second over here on this corner of the internet. So, today we're going to talk about what it looks like to embrace a different kind of feminism. What does it look like for a woman to feel like there's nothing wrong with her body? And what it looks like. What do we need to do as a society, not just Catholics and not just to a Catholic audience? What do we need to do as a society to help women and men, but to help women understand that they are needed in the workplace, that they are needed in the community, and that this has to then naturally translate into the things, policies around things like maternity leave, miscarriage leave, support for women after they have had babies, and women's healthcare in general. Everyone, welcome to the Possibility Mom Live, Leah Jacobson. Leah, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks
You
for having me.
best coaching track. Yeah, you might have missed that part of you do it all, and you do it all so beautifully. So I'm so happy that you could be here and join us today. Leah, for anyone who might not know you and your beautiful work, just share a little bit about who you are and how you got here.
Yeah, my name is Leah Jacobson. I'm actually in northern Minnesota, so it is still freezing cold here and miserable. So coaching track has actually been just really lovely this spring. It's like freezing cold every day when we're out on the track. It's still snowing. It's
Oh my
horrible.
gosh.
So that's what I do in my free time. I like to embrace what my kids are doing. I have 7 of them. I have 7 children, so not quite as many as you, but I still feel like it's busy. It's good. Um, Yeah, but really that's, my home life. I'm a mom, I'm a wife, I coach, I speak, I do all these things. But more so, I think what my kind of passion and activism is outside of my family is really this women's health issue. And so I am a board certified lactation consultant, and I founded Guiding Star Project, a nonprofit focused on opening up women's healthcare centers that just really tell women the good news, the beautiful truth about, your body was made for a purpose. You're not a mistake. You're not an accident. And what your body is doing, you shouldn't be working against it. Like, let's not divide ourselves. Our passions and our physical bodies don't need to be fighting. Let's get them in line with each other. Let's create a truly integrated health system for ourselves.
Oh, and there's so much in that last sentence that you just said that needs to be unpacked. And so I think this conversation is going to be a little bit philosophical. So we're going to talk about just ideas around women's health, but then I wanted to also be really empowering. Like, what do we need to do? If we believe this, then what does this look like actually in practice? So I want to start first with, you were raised Catholic and you worked at a Newman Center, and fill in the blanks there. Just like,
Yeah.
what was your upbringing in regards to looking at fertility and women's health in general?
Yeah, no, I think I actually have. It took me a long time to kind of understand and realize that I have a really unique perspective because of my upbringing. I grew up in the Midwest, a rural area, a dairy farm, actually, very far away from the closest town of, 600 people was the closest town. And that was like a big deal to go to town. It was like, the grocery store. So I was just surrounded by nature. just complete nature, animals, plants. Growing up on a farm is such a gift that I just didn't understand until I had my own children. And I was realizing it's very hard to teach some of these concepts to children that are just very, they're just, you're just soaked in them and you seep in them when you live surrounded by the natural order and the obvious, consequences of one action leads to another. And fertility is one of those things that I never had to have the birds and the bees talk. I lived on a farm. I saw it all around me all the time. At a very young age, you realized there are times of the year when, an animal comes into heat, when it's fertile. This is the breeding season. You let the bull into the pen with the cows at a specific time. You just use, I could give you lots more details, but you figure these things out pretty darn quick as a kid. And you recognize and realize that humans, I mean, we are mammals as well. Like, we follow similar patterns. And so I knew a lot of these things. And when I went to college, that was the eye-opening moment for me when I realized that, most people probably don't know. They probably don't know how, they might know, well, sex equals babies. They know that. That's the basics of fertility for most people. And if you don't want a baby, then you use contraception or you use protection. But they actually don't understand, just the nature behind it and how brilliant and predictable it actually is if you spend time in it, because we haven't spent enough time in it. We haven't spent enough time observing it, being comfortable with it, just letting it be all around us, to have the language and to have just the comfort of even being able to speak about it with a spouse, with a partner. We don't even know how to talk about it with each other.
It's so interesting you talk about your farm experience, because I lived in Toronto, Canada for most of my life, right in the center of the city, or the north end of the city, but like city, like really, really, really city. And then I moved to Ave Maria, Florida. That is, you wouldn't call it rural, but a city person would call it rural. So
Okay.
I called it rural. Like, it
Okay.
was a 45-minute drive ish to a Target, to a Starbucks. So like, that's how I was measuring rural. How far is it from a Starbucks, right? But I got used to a little bit more of a, I'm going to call just like a non-city way of life. Then we've come back to Canada and we spent some time on my beautiful in-laws farm. And there is just, and we are homeschooling. So it's a very different way of life right now.
Yeah.
And I am convinced of the value of farm life. I am
Yeah.
convinced. Montessori, interestingly, for those of you who are Montessori nerds,
Yeah.
um, part of their methodology is when you get to a certain age, I forget what it is. I think it's 14. I want to say it's grade 9. It's farm. Like, they take their education to the farm. So when you're in a traditional Montessori kind of setting, they start doing education like literally on a farm. That was, if I'm not mistaken, that was a big part of Maria Montessori's methodology for
Yeah.
schooling. Um, but what's interesting to me, and you shared in your book, Holistic Feminism, um, you didn't have to have the birds and the bees conversation. So
Yeah.
how did that evolve? Because obviously you did have to be able to explain it at one point to somebody else. You have daughters, and you became a lactation consultant. So when did you realize, okay, well, you've already shared that not everybody looks at the world the same way that I do with my farm experience. And so when did you have to start articulating it to others? When did it start to change into more like cerebral, conversation?
Yeah, I think so. When I very first started cycling as an 11-year-old is when that it connected that, for the animal's fertility and the predictability of it and the coming in heat and the seasons of fertility, that women also had that. So I understood that at about 11 or 12, that I knew I wasn't always fertile, that there's going to be periods of time where I am and I'm not going to be fertile. And that's how you plan. That's how you plan if you want to have a baby or not, is whether you use those times of fertility. I also was very, very entrenched in the idea that, sex is something that waits till marriage, that this is something that you're going to have to really choose carefully your spouse, because this is not the understanding of the world. You're going to have to find a man who also has a respect for your fertility and is going to allow your fertility to kind of govern your romantic relationship. So I knew that very young. And so I started praying, I think, for my future spouse at age 12 every night. I was like, dear God, please bless my future spouse, because I knew it was going to take a different type of man, because the type of, feminism, or like what the world was, saying women needed and women wanted, I just knew, I'm like, that's not going to work. That doesn't actually work that way. Like there has to be this greater communication, the whole, a woman needs a man like a fish needs a bicycle. That doesn't work if you're going to respect your natural fertility. And so I knew that as a teenager. Um, and so coming into college and realizing, whoa, most girls really don't get this. Like, I just thought it was kind of like the Hollywood elite and like just what we were seeing in the media that didn't get it. But then I realized like the average woman around me just had no sense of it. And
Yeah.
at that point, it was always cerebral, but it became activism pretty quick into college. Because I was, roommates that were women's studies majors, and we were having conversations about our periods and our cycles and family planning decisions. And I was pretty immediately thinking, if you're a feminist and this is like what women's rights are, I want nothing to do with it, because you have zero bodily autonomy, because you have zero fertility awareness. You don't know how your body works. And so I just remember becoming more active and activist in it very early in college. And then I did graduate early, and I went on to work for the Diocese of Duluth, Minnesota. I ran the Newman House at the University of Minnesota Duluth campus, and I got married very young to my husband. And then it was like, this is where the rubber hits the road. Like now we actually have to put this into action. Like I've been talking about it.
And we're going to talk about that, but very quickly, and I'm really excited to talk about it. I love talking about sex, like in a very wholly appropriate way, but I think we don't talk about it enough. Like
It's
just
awesome. It's totally cool. It's awesome. We should talk about it.
I'm just wrapping this 5-day challenge I hosted to help people build their six-figure business blueprint. And there was a beautiful woman who you also know, I won't name her name, but she loves coaching people on their fertility and having great sex. And it was so
Yep.
interesting because I said to her, I was like, who wouldn't want that? Do you want to have bad sex, or do I want to have great sex? Like, of course I want to have great sex. And it was such a funny little moment. And I just think we don't really talk about it enough. But okay, just really quickly, 60-second version for someone who might be listening to this and has no idea what we're talking about. What is fertility awareness in
Yeah.
60 seconds?
Fertility awareness is really truly like bodily autonomy for a woman, because it gives you the ability to plan your family, to plan whether or not you're open to children, pregnancies, by just simply observing your very observable, very predictable signs of ovulation and fertility, your fertile times in your period. So there's many methods of it. You use the biomarkers of temperature, cervical changes, breast tenderness. You can use the actual hormonal, like urine test. You can check your hormone levels. So many different ways of doing it. They are 99% accurate with correct use. It's a hormone-free, natural, healthy, completely risk-free way of knowing your body, not just for family planning purposes, I guess, but also just for, it's really your fifth vital sign as a woman. Like, how am I doing? Am I healthy? Do I see things that are concerning that I need to talk to the doctor about? That's fertility awareness, because it really, our fertile female bodies, we can't ignore them. They're who we are.
And then the practical, just real quick, the practical application is you can look at these signs and symptoms and then be able to say, I know at this portion of the month, I am very fertile. At this
Mhm.
portion of the month, I'm maybe like ish fertile. But then
Mhm.
at this point of the month, I am not fertile. Is that a fair way to summarize?
That's a very good, easy way of saying it. Yep.
Perfect. So rubber hits the road, and I want you to share as much as you're vulnerable or comfortable sharing. But what did it look like for you and your husband Josh to now put this into practice? Was it easy? Did you find it difficult? What was your experience now actually putting it into practice?
Yeah, it's interesting because my husband was a convert. He was not raised Catholic, and so he had been raised with a very different idea about contraception. And so he became Catholic right before we got married, and so he was understanding it also from that religious, like you said, you can understand it from the religious perspective. But he was learning as we were married. I always understood it as more of a feminist women's rights issue. This is bodily autonomy. This is my body. This is my choice. Like I always understood it from that perspective. And so as we got married, it was fascinating for him to kind of recognize and understand that like he was being called to like a refinement of his desires, of like what the world had told him, like is a man's right, is a man's, in marriage. That, I think a lot of maybe different, even Catholics, evangelical Christians, but whoever, we kind of have this idea that anything goes in marriage. Like, oh, you're married, it's fine. And that was a really good kind of wake up lesson right away for both of us to understand that. We learned pretty quickly that the time of the month that you desire sex the most is always when you're fertile. And so if you're trying to hold off on children, that makes it a little difficult. And we weren't, set on avoiding pregnancy right away, but we were a little surprised that it happened so easily. So 4 months into our marriage and we were pregnant, and it was a beautiful gift. And our first son, our first baby, arrived just a few short weeks before our first anniversary. So yeah. Those first couple years where we had learned a method of fertility awareness that didn't match very well with my body signs. And that's something I want to just tell every woman, is that there are many different methods of fertility awareness. And if the one that you are using is confusing, it doesn't make sense to you, you don't feel confident in it, try another method or add another method. And that's actually what ended up happening for us, is that as time went on, and signs were hard to read and it was just difficult, I just kept adding more biomarkers and more information. And pretty soon I was able to say, I know exactly when I am ovulating, and I know exactly that if we choose to have sex right now, we will have a baby. And we've been very blessed with good fertility. And that pretty much has been our story. Most of the way through, there have been very few surprises in our marriage, and it's been a gift.
So I want to pivot this conversation to what any of this has to do with a woman pursuing her goals and dreams,
Mm,
contributing without judgment, because
yeah.
that is a piece that you and I are so aligned in.
Yeah.
I think we come at it a little bit like just from different lenses, but we are so incredibly aligned. But I remember reading, um, I'm reading this interesting book right now on, um, I'm not going to name it just because it's not really useful. And anyway, just lots of thoughts about the book I'm currently
I
reading.
won't judge you. You can tell me privately.
she, she definitely has a big bias
Yeah.
towards a traditional form of marriage and traditional form of motherhood and all the things. So I was kind of like eyes wide open, knowing I was gonna, but I found the topic of this book really interesting. And so I was like, it's about moms who influence online. So I was like, oh, this is interesting. This is like what I do, right?
Yeah.
So I'm reading this book, and this is my issue with the word feminist. So she would 100% call herself a feminist.
Mm.
And she was talking about why people get upset with mom influencers. Like they get upset that they're selling things on the internet. And she's bringing in a lot of really interesting, very valuable things for people to consider. But there was this whole section, a big fat paragraph, where she talked about how women who are working need so much more support. She was basically lamenting how challenging it can be for a woman who works. And she's going on and on and on and on about how, like, we have terrible medical or maternity leave policies. We have terrible policies in the United States when it comes to, flexibility. When you have a baby, your employer kind of just doesn't really matter. You're back to work so many short weeks after, and you're supposed to operate as if uh, nothing has happened, so to speak, right? And I'm reading it, and I'm like, I know you have a very different lens on the world, but I agree with every single one of these points.
Mm-hmm.
I agree, I agree, I agree.
Yep.
Then she lumped in, and we have an archaic view of women's rights to her contraceptive rights, something like that.
Ugh,
Like
so close.
exactly, so close. Like I was like, I'm with you, I'm with you, I'm with you, I'm with you.
Like, we're
I think this is what I really want to unpack. It's like,
yeah.
why everything else is like check, 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 check. You and I line up in terms of feminism, but then we get here.
Mm-hmm.
This is so contrary
Yep.
when you think about it to what we're trying to support. So it's like on one hand, you talk about we need to give more support to moms, but then we also need to snuff out the very first thing that made them a mom. So
Yeah.
let's just talk about that. Why is this so vexing?
Well, Okay, I write about this a little bit in my book, and I speak about it more, candidly. And so this is that moment, with the second wave of the feminist movement where we see Betty Friedan and we see the feminine mystique, and we see this like realization and reckoning that our our stereotypes, our stereotypical like housewife, breadwinner, male, female, like that it wasn't working. So this is the 1950s where there's just like, this isn't working. And they were getting there. They were getting to that kind of moment of saying, like, what's the solution here? But right before they did, and the solution would have been things like better maternity leave policies, on-site childcare, support for women as mothers and employees. That was the direction it was trending. But then what happened in the 1960s, we got snubbed. We got swooped into the sexual revolution, which was much more focused on our rights to have sex, not our rights to like creative expression outside the home. And so we lost sight of that creative expression, that individuality, and that uniqueness as a woman. And we just threw all of our eggs in this basket of contraception, abortion. These are women's rights. Women's rights were no longer to like become truly who she uniquely is created to be. Her rights are now to be sexually available and free of children. And that I think was a really sad step back for the women's movement. And I think we're still like correcting it because it swung and we thought it was going to bring all this like fulfillment and happiness and joy, but it didn't. And in fact, women are now more miserable than ever. We all know that. And we look at the studies, we look at, even young girls right now, the loneliness and the depression and all the things that they're reporting upon. We're not well. Women are not well in this moment in time. I think we're correcting right now. I think we're coming back to saying, I do want to be open to children, but I also want to have a career. I do want to like many women, and you and I align so good on this because we recognize that every woman is so uniquely different and there is no stereotype that fits all of us. And I've always appreciated that about you because you kind of defy all the stereotypes, and I think we need more of that grace and more of that, motherhood looks different based upon our personal desires and our situations and our, our husbands, our spouses, like whatever that is, to give that little bit of grace to each other. Yeah. I know you asked something specific and I'm like, okay, where was that going again? Because you were really wanting to kind of just talk about like what happened, like where.
And this is the part that breaks my heart. So I just want to reflect back a couple things that you said there. So number one, we threw out like it sounds like this second wave of feminism, right? Am I make sure I use the terms correctly because I often mix them up. So the second wave of feminism, we opted for I want to have sex and that's free, like
Yeah.
freedom. So that freedom is sex. And we forgot about I have gifts and talents that I want to contribute to the world.
Yep.
And that kind of got forgotten about in second world feminism. It was like,
Well, and what it was is we assumed that our gifts and talents could not be brought to the world unless we shut down our fertility, unless we shut down our desire for motherhood. Like
yes,
because sex now is going to be completely unregulated. And this is the reality with natural fertility methods. Sex is somewhat regulated, but here's my argument for a type of regulated sex just a little bit. It puts the power in the woman's hands.
mm,
Women's fertility now is what governs sexual decision making in a couple. Men no longer have the ability to just, freely have sex whenever they want without consequence. And there is a decision making, there is a power shift that happens in a world where natural fertility rules.
yeah. So you might not have heard me say this at the top of the podcast when I was sharing that I'm pregnant. My husband and I are never surprised because we're just not like I might be surprised by the timing, certainly, meaning like, oh wow, really? Like we're actually pregnant right now. Didn't think like that could actually happen with everything going on in our life. So we might be surprised like that, but we're never surprised at the consequence. Like I
Mhm,
don't feel victim like
mhm,
that
mhm.
I'm a victim because I'm pregnant. I
Yep.
just don't like, and that's come from years of growth, obviously, and certainly in just like understanding my own fertility. But it's just yeah. It just I don't yeah. I don't know how else to explain it. It's just like that. The point I'm trying to make here is that it puts the power in the woman's hands.
100%. And if we're saying, yes, I'm willing to engage in sex with you at this time. And this is really truly where we have to, I think, because our world is very fallen, because people, men, women, both have not been raised with the level of virtue, the level of self-constraint, the level of discipline, this level of awareness. And there's been a lot of immediate gratification kind of baked into American culture, that we tend to think like this moment is the most important moment ever. And, you know, I'm not going to think about 3 weeks from now or 3 months from now or 3 years from now. Natural fertility doesn't fit well with that type of a living. An intentional lifestyle is what is required. You have to have intentionality. You have to have the ability to foresight and to think like, is this decision right now something I'm okay with? And if you're not okay with it, then you have to make a different decision.
Yeah. So good. And that does require, I'm just sort of imagining somebody who is impulsive and having an impulsive relationship, like that might be difficult to do.
Well, and it's also very difficult too when we have these abuse. Abuse is a very difficult situation for a woman to assert her power in this, you know, and it has, our fertility has been used against us as women as a form of subjugation from men who are, quite frankly, not worthy of holding the role of protector and spouse and father. And so men that act in that way are very dishonorable, but we stopped calling them that at some point. We stopped calling out that dishonor and we started to say, well, that's just boys. Boys will be boys. And that leads to women feeling the need to protect themselves against this abuse, against this use against men. And so contraception kind of became this like armor, this protection, this safety, when really it was just a complete breakdown of men honoring women.
Yeah, it became a breakdown of men honoring women. I really want people to hear that. Okay, I want to bring it back to what you said about how I defy stereotypes, right?
You do. You're
But
awesome.
but I want to like back it up several years before, because I definitely, and I do still feel some shame like in the statement I'm about to make, but I 100% at one point in my life, in my early marriage and before my marriage, I felt like children were going to be an impediment to my dreams. I want everybody to hear me say that. I thought children were going to be an impediment to my dreams. And I want to just give a couple real time examples. I started my television career right before I got married. And I remember they loved a concept for me. We filmed what's called a pilot, and then it was being shopped around to the major networks, and it was really, really fun. And I remember I had to go into studio and do some voiceover work. So sometimes you like miss a line, or sometimes they want to record like something that will go over a bunch of footage. So I was in a recording studio with the team, the director, and all these other people. And we were just kind of chit-chatting in between takes. They were like, "Lisa, honestly, like this is going to be amazing. You're like on the precipice of your career." And he kind of just offhanded said like, "Hey, like I know you just got married. Like you should probably really not think about having babies because it's really going to hurt your career."
Wow.
And Leah, I was probably 12 weeks pregnant. I had not told anybody because I believed that to be true.
Mm-hmm.
So I had not told anybody I was pregnant because I had so much drama in my head. I had so much drama around, oh my gosh, they just signed me for this huge contract. They want me to be like an HGTV personality, like, and now I've gone and gotten pregnant. And I had so many thoughts around it. And then that was probably the worst incidents I've ever had. I've definitely had other conversations, but because I was pregnant and because I was hiding it, because I felt I had to hide it, um, I would say the first few months, or sorry, few years of my marriage were kind of this dichotomy of feeling like I never want to feel that way again. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to quote unquote, forgive my expression, but I'm just gonna like stick it to them all. Like I had a big chip on my shoulder. I'm gonna prove it all to them that you can do it all and be it all and have it all and look amazing with a baby on your hip and yada yada yada. So in the first few years of my career, I had 4 babies in basically 5 years.
I did too. Same timeline.
And I definitely felt in those first few years. So we were open to life. Again, not I would sometimes be like really Lord the timing, but I was always in not control, but you know what I mean, like autonomy, I guess. Like, yeah, aware. I was aware I could get pregnant right now, but we chose to be intimate anyway. So it was never this sort of like surprise, so to speak.
Yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
but this still, of course, I had this feeling over here of no, that I'm gonna just like stick it to them all and prove that you can have a bunch of kids and no big deal. But then, of course, over here, I had no skills. I had zero skills. I had no skills for how to do this. I just kept telling my husband, like, oh, we just got to push a little harder, like just one more season. Like, we'll
Yeah.
figure out better childcare. Like, can't you just like I put a lot of demands on my husband in that
Yeah.
season. And this is the birth of my book. That's the story I tell. My minivan meltdown is comes right out of that experience. And so guess what? What I want to pause here and talk about is like how pervasive is this notion that your children are going to be at the impediment of your dreams? I mean, we have
Mhm.
very practical examples of, actresses getting up on stage rejoicing in their abortions because it furthered their acting careers, right? So we
Mhm.
have things like that. But why else do you think this is just so pervasive?
Well, I think it's pervasive. Yeah, like that Michelle Williams moment that you just mentioned there, like thank you to the Academy and I thank you to my abortion, so I could have this. I thought the timing of that was just so fascinating because it was right at the like kind of height of the Me Too movement. And we had just had this huge movement of women saying, this industry has abused me. This industry has expected me to like hurt myself in order to further myself. And then you have this grand moment of somebody who just completely epitomized that I laid down myself and hurt myself because of somebody else's expectation that was unrealistic for me. And so outside of Hollywood and outside of the Academy, I think that we've created systems where the expectation is for women to alter themselves to have a seat at the table. You're not welcome at this table until you change yourself. We're not going to change for you. We're not going to add maternity leave policies. We're not going to add childcare. We're not going to add breastfeeding rooms. We're not going to see, your droopy pregnant butt in our office. Like they don't want to see us that way. Like that's the reality. Like it becomes a major impediment when there's no seat for you at the table.
Yeah.
There's no spot for you in the office unless you fit their expectation, which is perky and beautiful and not swollen and not lactating. Those are all very unsexy things, evidently.
Yeah, there's an expression. I remember Kristen Riley, one Hail Mary at a time. Many of you love her. And she shared this on her Instagram. This was years and years ago, but just it was something to the effect of like why do we expect like when you're at work you're also not a mom? Like it's like I'm butchering the quote, but it was so poignant. Like
Yep.
w- w- it's like we pretend you're not a mom when you're in the office.
Yep.
And
That compartmentalization, that's compartmentalizing, and men do it so well. Like men can just like, this is the box that's open right now, and I'm going to close it and put it away. And now I'm going to open my dad box. And women just don't do that. We don't compartmentalize. Like we have a greater tendency to be whole, which
yeah,
is why I think what's happened to us is almost just more devastating. I mean, the dehumanization of just kind of our industrial culture, it's dehumanized both men and women. It treats men and women as products, as things that are just to do a means to an end. But for women, I think it has been just so devastating to our identity and who we are because we naturally do see the whole. We naturally do have a more integrated sense of who I am and how I belong because, our emotions tend to come across more strongly. There's these very beautiful differences, and it's really wounded us.
mhm, mhm. So my response to all of this was entrepreneurship. So and we're talking several years ago when not like today. Today, entrepreneurship is really accessible, meaning like a lot
Yeah.
of women can just pick up their phone and make money. Like I was sharing earlier in our conversation, be a mom influencer, and they can leverage their life and sell products via their phone. When I was starting, it was not like that. It was just kind of your traditional business. So I was doing an interior design business. My response to this and having a seat at the table was to create my own.
Yep.
Let's talk about how corporations and how just like North America in general can give women seats at the table that aren't necessarily entrepreneurship. I mean, entrepreneurship is a wonderful option.
Mhm.
But let's
Mhm.
talk about some practical ways that you'd like to see actual social change. What are some of those ways that would honor women
Yeah.
holistically? Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I've seen some huge progress in certain areas, like I'm a lactation consultant. And so in the last 20 years, that's one area that the US has actually seen tremendous progress. We've put in laws and protections for breastfeeding moms and created lactation spaces. And, they're can have their nursing breaks. They're unpaid, of course. I mean, there's still a long way to go. But I do think we're starting to acknowledge specific areas of womanhood and motherhood that have been scientifically proven to be healthy for moms and babies. So, breastfeeding, we've passed the test. It's good. Breast is best. Now, when it comes to these other areas of our female bodies, though, like our fertility, our natural fertility, like that still is kind of considered this dirty, shameful thing. Like our periods are still like, don't talk about it. Like it's still very hush hush and very shameful. Pregnancy and some of the really awesome things that our bodies go through in pregnancy, that's still very kind of taboo and like inappropriate for the workforce. And so I really practically, I mean, people are going to think I'm super feministy for this one, I guess, but like I see nothing wrong with menstrual leave days. If there is a day in the month where you are just not your best employee, like that should not be an issue for a woman to say, I'm taking a menstrual leave day. And it's not a sick day and it's not counting against me. It's not counting against my sick days. It's a menstrual leave day. I get one a month, whatever. I don't see an issue with that. That's acknowledging
That's
I'm
really
different than you guys. And I'm
yeah.
going to go home and I'm going to work from home.
I mean, even just a work from home where it's not counted necessarily as a sick day. Like it's just
Yeah.
like a optional work from home because of my menstrual period. I think, to be very frank, I think a lot of organizations would be very well served by that.
I think we could avoid a lot of drama in the workplace if we would just acknowledge that menstrual leave days are a good idea.
Now, I want to talk about maternity leave because I think I have some opposing viewpoints. Like I'm really curious what you think. So, is there a standard amount of time that you think is like
Mhm.
should be embraced? Like what do you think in terms of like a general, can we develop a general policy around maternity leave? Like what do you think?
Well, I think we need to let our bodies guide. Like, I think this is one of those instances where our bodies biologically tell us when we're ready to be separated from our babies. And as a lactation consultant and as somebody who is firmly, in the camp of babies here, like what's good for our babies, if we don't allow breastfeeding to become well established and we don't allow our babies to receive the nutrition they need, like we are putting them at risk. We're putting them at risk to, and their mothers as well. 6 weeks is the standard that most moms go back to work that I work with. I can tell you that most moms do not have a very established breastfeeding relationship at 6 weeks. It is far too early. They will not succeed. The goal for breastfeeding in the United States has always been about 12 months. They just went up to 24 months with the CDC and the World Health Organization. They got themselves in line. So 24 months is the recommendation for breastfeeding. Exclusive breastfeeding is 6 months. In order for a woman to exclusively breastfeed, she needs to have her baby either with her or be with her baby. It doesn't work. It's very difficult. I've known women who can do it, but the burden it places upon a woman and the anxiety it causes and just the stress of it.
Yeah. So let's
six
talk about that in practicality. Let's just say Guiding Star has like 100 employees and you're in a physical location. Okay. What would the policy be for your women? I'm putting you on the spot, but what would it be?
Yeah, I mean, we do have pretty awesome policies, and I'd have to go back and read them verbatim because it's been a little bit. But we basically have an 12 week, it's 12 weeks, up to 12 weeks paid. And then at that point, it's the decision to either start coming back part-time slowly, or to, I have to look at it again, but it's basically a phased back in policy back to their full time by, I think, back to whatever their previous amount was, I think by 6 months.
Very good.
So we try to get them back to work by 6 months if we can, but there's always flexibility. We write them that all the time. If there are situations or extenuating circumstances where you need to just have a different situation, let's talk about it.
And is this work from home or work in? So let's say you had a physical location and
Mhm.
women are not working from home. would it be like at 6 months you're back at the office? Is that kind of what you would?
Yeah, we would want to be able to do their job again, whatever their job previously was, because if we know we have to replace somebody, if and that's the thing, like we would never penalize a woman for saying like, this is not the time of my life for this. We'd be like, awesome. When you decide you want to come back in 2-3 years, let us know. Like there's no penalty here. Like that's fine. But in the meantime, we have to hire somebody else because we still need your job to get done,
Yes.
But
Go
yeah.
ahead.
No, I think we just try to be incredibly flexible. Most of our employees at the national office are virtual. And so we have tremendous flexibility of when work gets done, when we're able to do our work. Like this morning, I was on a field trip for 5 hours this morning with the fourth graders. So obviously I wasn't working, because I'll work tonight. That's when it happens. So having that flexibility to mom and be present and respecting one another's decisions as mothers is incredibly important to us.
Yeah. I think the gift of COVID showed a lot of people that a lot can get done at home. And
Mhm.
so for me, I okay, so in-person collaboration I think is really important. I do think that there
Mhm.
is something that happens just that's unique when you're together in person. There's side conversations,
Yeah.
there's obviously physical touch, things like that. So all of that can be meaningful. But I definitely don't think it has to happen every day, depending on
Agreed.
the organization, right? And so I just love the idea like of you can work from home and work with your baby. I love the idea of bring your baby to work until
Yep.
the point where your baby is becoming dangerous for your baby, right? So like um I never did this because I had one job. I worked for the Property Brothers for a period in an office. Um
Mhm.
and I don't think I had no my baby was quite old at that point. So it wasn't necessary for me to be really worried about nursing him like during that. I remember I still nursed him in the morning and then I nursed him at night, but he was like over 18 months. Like he was eating and he
Yeah.
didn't need me for nutrients. But I just remember thinking many times sitting in that office being like, it would really be no big deal if my baby was here right
Yeah.
beside me. Somebody probably wouldn't even notice
Yeah.
until the point they start making a lot of noise. And then obviously it starts to, maybe make it difficult for people to have phone calls or to focus or whatever. So I do think that there's like, I would love to see like, well, okay, so let's say you do that. We're kind of just spitballing really quickly, but
Well, I can tell you what's actually happening. So I can tell you our center in El Paso, Texas, we just got licensed this last week for our employee. We've always had child watch. Child watch has been a requirement in all of our centers for any of our patients. So they can bring their baby with while they're getting their care. And we'll watch their child for up to 2 hours a day for free while they're getting care. But we just this last week got licensed in the state of Texas to provide child care for our employees on site. And so they pay $10 a day to bring their baby to work with them and have it professionally. It's a Montessori inspired child watch,
yeah,
$5 for each additional kid. Because I believe that's an important thing and it's very flexible. Um, and they don't have to be committed to it every single day. It's like, all of a sudden I have to bring my baby to work with me today. I'm coming into the office. I've been working at home virtually and now I want to come in because I have a meeting and I'm bringing my baby today. And I think that that's the type of solution that we need everywhere.
I talked about this on the podcast with a beautiful prof at Ave Maria University, Janice Breidenbach. And we talked about how like she just will have meetings sometimes and bring her toddler with her to the
Mhm.
meetings. And her colleagues, like these are academics, philosophers, like her colleagues will be like, how can you do that? And again, she goes back to this saying that I was almost quoting from Kristen, like, I'm still a mother even while I'm working. And my regular childcare didn't work out today. So he's coming and he's coloring beside us. And then that's just it. And I just think if we didn't compartmentalize so much,
Yeah.
that there could be an interesting creative approach. And then maybe there wouldn't be Lisa Cannings hiding their pregnancies because they wouldn't have to feel like their
Yeah.
baby was an impediment to their success. And that's the thing that I really strive, and I know you really strive towards. I just think there's so many creative ways that people can do things in life. It's not possible for all. If you're a surgeon, you're not bringing your kid to work with you. I get it. I'm not trying to be naive. If you're a police officer, like there's certain jobs that just simply don't exist where you can do that, right? But
Yeah.
I just think philosophically, if we can like look at the way we run things, learn from COVID, and create just a lot of, again, flexibility, but support. I love that at El Paso, you're going to provide that child watch.
I mean, that's us walking our talk. You know, we talk about this, but then as employers, do we do it?
Yeah,
So,
I love it.
yeah.
So you are hosting something so exciting that is going to really help people be able to talk about this and take action. If you're listening to this conversation and you're like, yes, me too. This is what I want for women. I want women to not feel like they have to deny themselves of their fertility or squash it or suppress it or be shamed, like to have shame around it. And you want to, like me, like I'm in the journey on this. I want to be able to talk about this with a bit more efficiency, more efficacy. Tell us about the symposium that you are hosting next week, May 3rd through the 5th.
Yeah, May 3rd through the 5th, we are going to be is the Holistic Feminist Symposium. So really building off themes from my book that, you know, day one, we're going to just try to talk about your unique self, who you are. You know, we take on so many expectations from others to be certain things. And so that first day is to really try to break through and think of who am I? Like, what is the life I'm meant to live? Because I really only get one shot at it. What are my unique gifts? Am I at peace with myself? Like, am I like saying things aren't possible because I'm a woman? Am I saying, you know, how am I limiting myself and how to like kind of break free of that? Day two is you know, my college roommates didn't understand how their body works. I don't think most women understand how their body works. I think we're going to talk about that a little bit, you know, to the point of, is this good news only for like Catholic women or religious women? Or is this a lifestyle? Is this a way to find freedom for every woman, which I believe it is. I believe this is the ultimate feminist, you know, decision to take bodily autonomy and your fertility into your hands and understand it. So day two, we're going to talk about that, how to do that, and how to really talk to people about it and kind of, you know, defend it or not defend it, just to make it your life. And then day three is really about activism. Like, how can we make this the reality for our daughter's world? Because it's pretty radical for us to make this decision, but I want it to be totally normal for my daughters to make this decision. So how can we change this world? How can we activate ourselves to do something?
It's so important, the work you're doing. Like I said at the top of this podcast, I still stumble on my words. I still feel a little bit awkward, but I do not want ever in life there to be a situation like I experienced. Young Lisa Canning feeling like she had to hide her pregnancy. It took me a lot of mess to kind of get to where I am now. Like, meaning it was a lot of like trial and error and like
Yeah.
messiness and more conflict and more suffering than necessary, I think, in my own life to kind of grapple with this thought that children are an impediment to my success. And I'm standing here telling everybody, no, they can actually like incredibly like they don't have to be separate. Everything.
I just want to say, Lisa, as you were saying that earlier, I'm like, whoever these networks or channels were, like, you would have made so much better of a show, like having all these babies. Like, if you could have done the show and had the babies, if they were like, you would have been incredible to watch. I feel like somebody really missed out.
Well, if somebody wants to give me a show now, you know where to reach me.
I think you'll get it one of these days because I will watch that. I will watch that.
And if you're listening to this and maybe you're farther in the journey, like you're behind Leah and I, like you're just starting out in your motherhood, you're having these concerns. Maybe you're an entrepreneur who's been following me for a while and you're just concerned about how can I build a business when I already feel so strapped? How can I build a business when I'm already feeling so exhausted, when pregnancy is difficult for me? I want to encourage you to come to this event. I'm going to be speaking on day one to talk about this, just your unique call and why you're necessary and why it's so important. Let's just close talking about judgment. So I think what I experienced in both sort of camps, so to speak, I had the camp over here of I want to prove it all to all of these like network executives and like kind of fancy people. I'll just call them fancy people. I wanted to prove to all of them that I was still with it and still
Yeah.
like cute and marketable with like babies. But then I also wanted to prove it to all of my like Catholic homeschool mom friends that like, look, no, I'm like full of virtue. I'm like so holy. Like I'm trying so hard to be like a good mom. What is all that in common? Judgment. I felt judged from all sides. And as a mindset coach, I realized that like I get to be I get to take ownership of my own thoughts. Other people don't get to sort of inform what I think about me, but I do have agency there. But of course, it can be difficult when you're worried about what's your mom going to think when you're announcing you're pregnant yet again, or what's your employer going to think. And so, how do we do this without judgment? How do we pursue our dreams without judgment?
Oh gosh, just that deep mind work that you were talking about, that deep realization, that telling yourself in that mind work of, I don't need to apologize for being me. Like my decisions are mine, like this is my life. You don't know the life I live. And so there's so much mindset work that it's easier when you've seen the examples in your life and you know this to be true. It's just so much easier. But if you haven't had that, there's just a really learn to really love yourself, get to know your strengths. So much of that.
And rejoice and celebrate in who you are. There's only one you. Leah, I really want to encourage everybody, come to the Guiding Star Holistic Feminism Symposium happening May 3rd through the 5th. It is completely free, and you are going to learn how to embrace who you are as a woman, which a massive part of that is your fertility, how to understand it, get educated on what that looks like. And then how do you activate? How do you talk about this with your daughters who are maybe at the beginning of their cycle season? And how do you talk about this with other people where, similar to me, you might feel just super awkward? How do you have these conversations and then impact the world, impact things like maternity leave, impact things like the way that we help moms when they've had babies? Leah, where can people go to learn more about you and your work? And of course, sorry, go to the link right below this video to grab your free spot in the
Thank
simple.
you so much for putting that in there. Thank you, Lisa. I appreciate that you just put it right there because I'm like, it's a long link to give to people. Okay.
Where do we connect with you, Leah?
Yeah, I think the easiest is probably in Facebook. Like we're over on Facebook and Instagram. I'm at Holistic Feminism, holistic with a W, because we all need to be whole. So Holistic Feminism at Instagram and on Facebook, and then Guiding Star Project as well on Instagram and Facebook. I think that's the easiest way.
I learn every time I hear you open your mouth. Like I really, really mean that. Every time you open your mouth, there's just like a new gem, a new nugget. And truly, like I'm on a journey. I thought that this was kind of just like, I'm just going to stay over here in my little like Catholic corner and my little Catholic understanding of this. But you have really woken me up to realize that this is a global this is a societal problem, and we all truthfully like need to play a part in this. So Leah, thank you for all the work that you do, and we will see all of you because I'm going to be speaking on day 1, so you got to come. We'll see everybody at the Holistic Feminism Symposium. Thanks, Leah.
Thanks, Lisa. Have a great day.